Hello everyone, welcome back to the Daily Knitter Knitting Podcast. My name is Tiffany. It's been quite a while since I've done another podcast episode, and probably the reasoning is I am 36 weeks pregnant, so we are in the end game now with being pregnant, and with the third trimester just comes a lot more fatigue, joint pain. My hands get sore really quickly now, so I'm not able to knit at the same pace that I was even in earlier stages of pregnancy. And I've just been kind of taking it easy on my body. I've also been spending a lot more of my free time nesting, getting together baby boy's nursery, putting together my office. This is another background switch. Usually I film in our family room, which is kind of like our TV room. I really like the background and the lighting in there. But recently I have decided to rearrange my office just so it fits my lifestyle a little bit better once we transition into having a newborn. And very, very early on, if you have been watching my channel for a while, I was filming actually in the nursery room, which used to be my office, because prior to having a child, that room is bigger. It's definitely the secondary bedroom of the house. So for, over the year that we've lived in this house, that was my office, and this smaller room was our guest bedroom. Of course, now that we are having a newborn, we're moving him into that room because that will be his room that he grows up into. And I've taken the smaller room as my office. So that's why there's been so many background switches over the past few months of me having this channel. But anyways, I have only one finished object today to show you all, but it is one that I'm super proud of. So let's just get started. This is my completed Lyon sweater by Petite Knit. The photos I'm including are, of course, me wearing them as I am in my third trimester of pregnancy, so the way it's fitting over my belly looks kind of funny. I wanted to knit a sweater in my usual size because obviously once I give birth, I'm not planning to have a big stomach like this, and petite knit patterns tend to be more oversized anyways, so even if I retain some of the pregnancy weight, I still feel like this would yield me a nice oversized sweater look that I was going for. So this is the extra small, which is her smallest size. And even with the extra small, the chest circumference is 104 centimeters, and that's pretty large compared to my usual chest size. So that gives me like a really good positive ease throughout the whole garment. And I am so proud of this beauty. So the yarn that I used is Knitting for Olive Merino, held double in both colors. The lighter color is Marzipan, which is probably one of their most popular neutral colors, I think. And the blue is just called Navy Blue. It's a very true, deep, cool tone navy blue color. This color combo is almost exactly the colorway that she has for her sample photo, which I'll put a picture of so you can get an idea. I think it's just the cream color she uses maybe is a little lighter, and I'm pretty sure for that version she uses Lyon Sunday held double. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. I was in between using both. My local yarn shop supplies a lot of Lyon, so I had plenty of opportunity to use Sunday held double, but I just wanted to try out more of the Knitting for Olive line because they really only have 5 or 6 bases, and up until this sweater I had tried the heavy merino and pure silk, and so their merino is very popular held double because it's a sock weight yarn, and a lot of people like to hold it double to create a DK weight sweater, and it's just a combination I haven't used before. Whereas the Lyon Sunday, I've knit the Oslo hat beanie in it before, and I really enjoyed that process, and I love the Lyon Sunday yarn. But like I said, I wanted to try out the merino because I feel like they're very comparable and people like both. And since it's so easy for me to access Lyon, I figured down the line I would definitely knit with that yarn again. So I just decided to go for the Knitting for Olive yarn combo this time around, and I really enjoyed knitting with it. The yarn is super smooth. I love the fabric and drape that it creates when it's held double. So I would definitely recommend testing out the Knitting for Olive Merino held double in a DK weight sweater if you are interested. The gauge for this sweater is 20 by 30, and I pretty much hit gauge perfectly. Not surprising, because again, the Sandisarn Sunday and Merino are very similar. So, you know, I wasn't too worried about hitting gauge or not. Now moving on to the construction without going into too much detail, because of course this is a paid pattern, so I don't want to like detail exactly how it was made, but you essentially start knitting flat with the back stitches, and then you kind of like pick up for the shoulders in a different way than I've done before in any petite knit pattern. So that was interesting to me. It was a new technique that I had never done before. I don't even know what it's called because I'm not a very technical knitter, so I apologize that I can't give you like the exact name of what it's called. But you essentially are knitting the shoulders and the back together in kind of like a crescent way, and then you finally do raglan increases and combine it into the body and continue with raglan increasing all the way down. Of course, it is striped, so while you are doing that in the pattern, it tells you when to attach your stripe, your first stripe, and then you're essentially knitting 4 rounds of the navy blue and then 5 rounds of the main color. And of course, you can modify that if you are comfortable with modifying patterns, so you could make either or, you know, thicker or thinner to your liking, as long as they're consistent throughout the garment. I mean, I guess you could even make them not consistent if you want. It's really up to you. You could even do this entire sweater in one color, which I might do just because I really like the construction and fit of this sweater. I might even just knit another one in one whole color and not do stripes. And that's basically the construction. And then, you know, the ribbing on the sleeves and the body are all 1x1 ribbing. And the neck is a very typical petite knit neck construction, where you essentially pick up for the neck, you knit double the length, and in the middle you're doing a 3 rounds of double knitting, so that when you fold it over, it creates this beautiful, crisp, very polished look, and then you bind it off while attaching it down to the bottom. It can be a little finicky if you when you do it the first time, but now that I've done this style of neck multiple times, it's definitely my preferred method of doing a neckline. So I find it very easy to do once you've done it a handful of times. But yeah, so that interesting shoulder pickup creates this really pretty, crisp shoulder edge that I just think looks so polished and professional. And again, I apologize, I don't know what it's called. It's not a saddle shoulder because there isn't like the other on the other side. I really don't know. If you can put it in the comments if you know what the name of this type of shoulder construction is, but I just think it looks so good. I'll talk a little bit about the stripes. This was my first time doing stripes, and I think for the most part I did pretty good. There's just a handful of parts here. Let me see where it is. Yeah, right here where you can tell that I think a little bit of the blue is peeking through here, and then a little bit of the white is here, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. I think my tensioning, well, honestly, I think when I pull it flat, it's not as obvious, but there definitely are some parts where my tensioning could have been a little bit better so that you don't create that kind of little jog. But I'm not too worried about it because it's on the side of the garment, and I think once I got to the sleeves, my tensioning got just a little bit better. Like you can still see a little bit of that jogging, and I did use the tip that she provides in her videos to eliminate jogs. And I don't know, I'm thinking it's probably just still like a tensioning issue because I've never done stripes before that is causing that slight unevenness. But again, that's okay. This is also on the underside of the sleeve. From the front, I think it looks beautiful and tailored and professional. So I'm pretty proud of myself for doing that. Now as to some modifications, I didn't want to modify this sweater too much. I really wanted to try to knit it to the pattern, which I pretty much did. The only modification I did was I shortened the ribbing by 2 centimeters, but I was able to retain the overall length of the sweater because she has you end on the main color and then go into the ribbing. And if I had ended on the main color, I would have, you know, 2 centimeters less of ribbing versus if I decided to just go strictly with the length of when you're supposed to start the ribbing, it would have been, you know, on the off color, which you could do as well. I mean, it's not going to change the overall look of the sweater too much, but for me, I don't like ribbing, which I think a lot of us prefer stockinette to ribbing anyway, so I was happy to shorten the ribbing by 2 centimeters. And I still think the 5 centimeters gives it a good finishing length and it looks nice and polished. And I just made sure to do the same thing on the sleeves. The other modification I made is one that I make usually, which is I do a traditional bind off for all of my bind off edges, regardless if it is ribbing or not, because I prefer this clean, sharp edge to a sewn bind off. I've done both. I've talked extensively about why I don't like the Italian or tubular bind off. I find it super finicky, and I'm not sure if it's the way that I'm doing it or if it's just, I don't know, like I think I'm doing it right, but I just don't like the way it looks, to be honest, on garments. I really do prefer this just traditional bind off, and so that is what I do. I just make sure to do it just a little bit loose so it's not super tight, and I've never had a problem with it being too tight, really. So if you're like me and you don't like a tubular bind off, maybe just try the traditional one and see how you like it. I think it looks beautiful and it's much easier to do. So those are pretty much all the modifications I made to this garment. Like I mentioned briefly before, overall, I really enjoyed this knit. I really like the construction. I like the way it looks and fits over the top of my body. So I would not be surprised if I knit this again in a different colorway, with or without stripes. I think just the polished way it fits is really, really nice. And I could see myself knitting this in a ton of different variations. And I just really enjoyed the construction process of this. So yeah, that is my Lyon sweater. Next, let's move on to some whips. So my first main whip that I am currently focusing on, I like to call it like my day knitting project. So during the day when I really want to like sit down and focus on a project, that is usually my main project. And that is the Ballard Tee by Sari Nordlund. This is my first time dipping my toe not only into cables, but also into a Sari Nordlund knit. And I wanted to pick a pattern that was more accessible to someone who has never done cables before. And I liked that this t-shirt essentially just has one repeating cable motif. You can see it's just, even though it's multiple panels of cabling, it's the exact same type of cable. So I really only had to learn one, or like, you know, 2 techniques, which is basically making the left cross and the right cross. Now that I know how to do cables and have done even just this much, I feel much more confident in diving into a more complex cable piece. But I'm really glad that this was my first one that I am diving into. And you can see I've completed a decent amount of the back panel. So I obviously won't talk about too much about the construction stuff because I'm very still early on, but I will say just for cabling, it's a really fun technique. I really enjoy it. I can definitely see the appeal of knitting cables. I think compared to stripes, even though stripes is not technically color work, it's not nearly as complicated as color work, but I would say even between the 2 more advanced techniques, I'm kind of enjoying cabling more, just because for the most part you don't have to do a lot of yarn management. I'm just using one ball of yarn, whereas the stripes, you know, you have to do some yarn management, and it's a little finicky and harder to do on the go and things like that. So I'm really enjoying this process. This is a DK weight t-shirt, and I was really tempted to knit it in that brown color that she has in her sample photo, but I just have so many brown pieces already in my wardrobe that I didn't just want another light brown t-shirt, so I decided to actually go for a color that's like a little more outside my comfort zone. I do also have a lot of blue in my wardrobe, but I don't have a lot of this lighter sky blue. I usually trend towards like navy blue or like a cornflower cool blue rather than this like warmer blue. Also, it's raining outside, so the lighting is not great, so I'll try to put like a photo of what this blue looks like if in case it doesn't show up well on video. But the yarn that I'm using is Barocco Vintage DK, and I can't remember where I learned about this yarn. It was from a knitting podcaster that I was watching who talked about how economical this yarn is because it is a acrylic nylon wool blend. But it still remains pretty soft, and the acrylic content makes it so that it's machine washable and it's very inexpensive to purchase. I purchased mine on the Knit Picks website. I think you can get it, in multiple different websites, but that's just the one that I purchased it on. This is the color Calico, and like I said, it's a DK weight yarn. It has some of that like melange, maybe it's like some of the white and blue kind of going through it, so it almost looks like a little marled or heathered, maybe is maybe the word that I'm going for. They have a really big shade selection, so that's nice if you're looking for different types of colors. There's so many colors to choose from, and I'm really liking it so far. I like that the wool makes it still feel a little more luxurious than like 100% acrylic, but the acrylic makes it nice and glossy and smooth, and it's fun to knit with. It doesn't split at all, and I like the way the cables are popping with this color. I think it looks really nice. So I'm excited to see this come to fruition, and I'm really having a positive experience knitting cables, so this will definitely not be my last cabled project. Next up is my summer cast on, and that is the Cloud Tee by Petite Knit. I have knitted the cloud blouse twice. She also has a cloud sweater and a cloud vest or tank top, and this is the t-shirt version, and this has a stitch gauge of 28, so I thought it was a perfect time to test out the Knitting for Olive cotton merino yarn, which is a 28 stitch gauge yarn on 3mm needles. I did my Tombow tee in pure silk, and I did not love the knitting process. The end product is beautiful with the drape, and I can't wait to wear it this summer and really test out the silk content and how it feels on the skin. But I just really, really did not enjoy knitting with that yarn. It was really hard, and it almost like felt like it was gonna give my fingers blisters. So I don't really wanna knit with that again unless I really end up wearing the finished piece this summer. So instead, I did want to try out their cotton merino, which I am liking a lot more so far because I think it's because of that merino content. It makes it a little softer, but the cotton makes it nice and structured. And I'm hoping this will also be a good summer piece just because I don't mind wearing cotton when it's really hot out, to be honest. So I think that'll be fine. This is how much I've done so far. It's really just the back panel right now. You knit to a certain point of stockinette and then you pick up for the shoulders. So I've really, only done basically all stockinette, but I'm really liking how it is looking. And the color I chose was oatmeal, which I think is another popular color. It's kind of just, it is kind of like a true oatmeal color. And I actually have a commercially bought tank top that's in a similar color to this, so I figured having a t-shirt would look good. I really like the finishing details on all of the cloud line, which is essentially that like thin line of ribbing, and then you do knitting at the bottom so that it gives it kind of that raw hem look. The Amy sweater also has that type of finishing to it, and I've always just liked the look of that, so that's why I picked the Cloud Tee. And otherwise it's coming along. This is kind of my on-the-go whip because it's so compact. It's easy to bring with me in a purse. Just drop this. And because of that, I don't really actively work on this when I'm at home, but that's okay. Summer knits for me tend to be my if I get to it, I get to it type projects. And we are also doing a big trip to China in October. So if for some reason I don't finish this in time for summer, because we'll have a newborn at the end of spring, so I'm not pressuring myself to like finish this before he gets here or anything, but if I end up not having enough time to finish this in the springtime, totally fine. I will just bring this, and this will be my main project for us when we go back to China, and I will have plenty of time to knit on this, because if this is the only, you know, one of two projects I'm bringing, I know I'll be able to finish it either on the plane ride there or just while we are there and have downtime. That's essentially how I finished the Cumulus tee, was when we went on our trip to Switzerland. So that is kind of my plan for this, is that currently there's no plan to finish it on any timeline. So I will not probably share it on this channel again until I either make really a lot of progress on it or it's a finished piece. But so far I do really like the yarn, and I do like this more than the pure silk. So if you have tried the pure silk and are not a super fan and are thinking about trying their cotton merino, I would totally try it. And they have a lot of colors as well, and I definitely enjoy knitting with this more than the pure silk. My last whip is actually a Aran weight or bulky weight piece. I feel like I've started to notice this trend where my sweet spot of knitting is definitely DK weight garments around the 20 to 22 stitch gauge range. That is like my preferred weight of garments to knit with. And then usually when it gets to the warmer months, I like to have a summer cast on just to have, but I also still want an easy knit, and that's like a bulky weight knit. So it's kind of funny that I realize now I basically have one of each weight, and it's really just based on my mood of what I want to work on. But this is the Step by Step cardigan by Florence. She is the creator of the Step by Step sweater, which is a very, very popular sweater pattern. The Step by Step cardigan is a pay-as-you-wish pattern, which I think is great, so it's accessible to everyone. You can pay full price for it, 50%, zero, and it is a very basic raglan cardigan. And I have never knit a cardigan before, personally, because I don't like to knit flat, and for cardigans, unless you decide to steek it, aka cut it down the middle, you have to construct them flat. So for me, I did want the experience of knitting a cardigan because I do love the way cardigans look, and to combat that dread of like having to knit flat, I wanted to find a bulky weight cardigan so that way you're just knitting less because the yarn is thicker. So I thought the Step by Step cardigan would be perfect. I'm actually knitting it in the 3rd size because I want this to be a little more of an oversized sweater cardigan. So I kind of want to wear it more like a sweater than a cardigan, even though it's going to technically be a cardigan. And the yarn that I'm using is the Barocco Vintage Chunky. It's the exact same composition as the Barocco DK. I keep saying, it's Barocco or Barocco? I don't know. As the Barocco DK, except this is just a thicker gauge, hence the chunky name. It's 14 stitches by 21 rows. This is the color aubergine or eggplant. I guess if you're from the US, aubergine is eggplant. And I'm really loving this purple color. It does have some variation in it. Again, I'll put a photo if you know, if the video color is not turning out well, but you can kind of see here it has some almost like reddish brown through it with the purple, and it gives it a lot of dimension, and it looks so pretty. I really am enjoying this yarn. So this might be my go-to like bulky weight yarn. Now the pattern calls for a 16 stitch gauge. And like I just said, this has a 14 stitch gauge, but that's on 6mm needles. So what I did is I did not gauge swatch because I'm a bad knitter, but instead I just went size down and did a 5.5mm needle. And I tend to, I'm definitely not a tight knitter, but if I were to place myself on the spectrum of tight to loose, I'm probably closer to tight. So for me, usually going down half a needle size is enough to kind of reach that gauge if it's like a 2-stitch difference, if that makes sense. So I probably should have gauge swatched, but you know what? I didn't. So I'm using 5.5mm needles, and at least pre-blocking, that is pretty much getting me that 16 stitch gauge. So I think because this has a decently high acrylic content, it's not gonna block out too big, and I think I'm gonna hit gauge the way I want. But I'm also not too worried because I'm knitting up a size even from my usual size. So worst case, it's a little small. It's still going to give me a lot of that positive ease that I want. So, you know, do as I say, not as not as I do. I always say that. Like, of course, you should always gauge swatch, but look, for me, I can't be bothered. This is how much I have done so far. I'm basically just working the raglan increases. I guess it's still called the yoke on a cardigan, like the top part. I think that's still what it's called, even if it's not a sweater. But you can kind of see if this were a sweater, you know, it would just eventually be joined in the round. But with a cardigan, you're just doing the exact same thing, except you're not joining and you're going back and forth instead. And I'm really enjoying it. The yarn is super soft and chunky, and it is going faster because of the 5.5mm needles. So for me, this is a nice piece that I like to work on currently when I'm just watching TV in the evening with my husband, because it's fairly mindless. You know, once you get to the raglans, you just have to do raglan increasing, which I'm very comfortable with. And you don't really, at the part of the pattern that I'm at right now, you don't really have to keep track too much of, you know, numbers and things like that. You're just kind of knitting back and forth. So this has been a great piece to work on when I'm watching TV, and it's just very satisfying because it's so bulky compared to, you know, my summer knit, which took me forever just to get that much, and this was like 2 days of knitting got me to this length. So yeah, if you're looking for a break and like a nice easy piece to work on, try out the step-by-step cardigan. It's I've been really liking it, and I like the way that this yarn is coming out in this pattern. I think it looks really good with the raglan and everything. So I am excited to see how this comes out. Alrighty, that is pretty much it. I don't do a lot of acquisitions on this channel because I tend to only purchase yarn when I have patterns in mind for them. So they're almost always whips by the time I film a video like this. I'm not quite sure when my next episode will be because now at 36 weeks pregnant, it is really up to him when he wants to arrive in this world. So he could come tomorrow, he could come in 4 weeks, I don't know. So if he obviously decides to come early before I have any other finished objects, you probably won't see me on this channel for a little bit. But I am very active on Instagram, and I always try to post sneak peeks of projects that I'm working on there. My handle's always down below, so following me there is probably the best place to stay updated. I will definitely, you know, post on there once I give birth and things like that. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope you all are doing well, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.